Today, if you had almost $200 billion to spend, what would you do with it? Let's ask Jeff Bezos, shall we?
Then, a deep dive into the twists and turns likely in the impeachment trial of the century.
And who wants to be mayor of NYC? And who should get the job?
I'm Alexis Cordato, and this is Future Forward.
I am Steven Rosenbaum. Let us launch. Hey, Alexa.
Hey, Steve. Happy snowy Sunday.
You know,
Again.
I gotta say, looking at this rundown, I'm gonna admit right up front, I just think this is gonna be a really fun pod. Like
Totally.
really, really chewy, really interesting, good takeaways. Get your notepads out, vote against us, bet. But like, there is no doubt that we are going to unfurl some really interesting thinking. So it's 3 chapters today. We'll do Jeff Bezos first, then we're going to play in the impeachment space for a little bit, and then we're going to wrap up with the mayor of New York. And so shall we dive in?
Let's do it.
So let's start with the Atlantic article inside Jeff Bezos' master plan.
Best cover image ever for an article.
And by the way, that really, I mean, Franklin Foer is a great writer. I didn't know that he had history with Bezos, which is fascinating. But it's quite colorful and quite granular. And I've actually, after spending time prepping for the pod, I've changed my opinion about where I think the Bezos story is going.
Okay, so let's back up because it's possible that your story of Jeff Bezos and mine is a little bit divergent. I'm curious. So for me, I think I just, I'm an Amazon user. I followed the acquisitions. He was an investor in Stack Overflow, which is where I worked a few jobs ago. So I know all of these things that he's done, but to the point of this article, I don't feel like I've ever been exposed to this intrinsic motivator. It's like it's not as clear or obvious like what he wants and cares about. And so was that your understanding too?
So a couple of things that I think are worth remembering. He started out at D.E. Shaw, which is this super brainy hedge fund. He's always been super smart and had ambitions to do global world-changing things, going back to high school. But for the longest time, the media has played Amazon as this kind of great destroyer. And I think, one of the things I think about a lot with kind of people at the Bezos level is, there is a question to be asked, which is, was the world always going to go this way? And was he just the person who arrived at the right place at the right time to do it? And I think about Steve Jobs in that regard as well. Like was the world always going to become the world of personal computers? And did Jobs just be the right guy at the right time? And so when you look at what Bezos has done, I mean, most of it has been essentially about, I'm going to use buzzwords and you can kick me under the virtual table, but essentially reducing friction, right? I mean, most of what Bezos has done either at AWS or at Amazon.com is inherently not very sexy. It's about warehousing and robotics and trucking and delivery. I mean, that's really what it's about.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, when I mentioned that we were doing this on the pod the other day, somebody said to me kind of with a sharp tongue, well, all he'd have to do if he wanted to do good is just pay his people more.
Certainly one approach.
And it's probably worth putting a pin in that because, while the federal government is struggling to get to a $15 minimum wage and is probably not going to win that, Biden is probably not going to win that battle in this round, Bezos just did it. Everybody who works for Amazon gets a $15 minimum wage. Just did it. Made the decision. He gets zero credit for that.
Mm-hmm.
But I have long history with Amazon and with Bezos and with the place and with various products. I was an advisor to a product there. The thing that's worth knowing is that the thing that has been his greatest passion is not delivery of dog food and diapers. His greatest passion, going back to high school and then specifically college, is space. And not like a hobby, so in reading deep into the Atlantic article, it says that he ran the campus chapter of Students for the Exploration and Development of Space at Princeton.
So nerdy.
So nerdy, exactly. So
well, that's why in this photo, colonized outer space is literally top of mind. It's like right, takes up the most space.
But the question is it a hobby or is it the thing he wants to be remembered for? I mean, he's 55 years old. He's the richest man on the planet. Although interestingly enough, Gates was briefly richer than Bezos is now.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, when you study sort of these titans of industry and billionaires, I'm not sure how much legacy enters their. I'm not sure how much legacy even plays a part into their work.
So, just to jump around a little bit, first of all, why is he leaving now? So, it wasn't very long ago that Amazon was not profitable, had no plans to be profitable, and basically told all of its investors, don't expect us to be profitable anytime in the near future. And this is kind of a standard internet startup play, right? Which is you come in, you undercut the competition, you underprice everything, you over deliver on services, and then once you pushed everybody out of the market, you can price things at whatever you want. And I was thinking this the other day. I was buying a pair of shoes on Amazon, which is weird in and of itself. And I realized that it's almost impossible to get the best price. They've made that so hard to find.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, okay. So your question about why he's leaving now, I think one is there's sort of a looming pressure around regulation, right? There's been a ton of speculation that maybe AWS should be its own entity and that we should dissolve or break apart parts of Amazon. I think that I could imagine that he doesn't want to deal with that, and so elevating Jassy to the CEO role. Jassy led, or still leads, Amazon's AWS division. Cool. That's his problem. Second is I actually think maybe he's going through like a personal thing. He just had a divorce. He has a girlfriend. He has kids. Like maybe he just wants to like play more. Play meaning like spend more time in different areas of his life that are more experimental, whether that's personal life, space life, Washington Post life, who knows? But those are my two best guesses.
So I totally disagree with the last one.
Okay.
I think two things. When you run a business, like I don't know how many direct reports he has, but let's assume it's more than 4 and less than 10. So every one of them struggles to get on your calendar to talk to you about this personnel issue or this legal issue or this pending lawsuit or this settlement or this IP battle or this opportunity to, so for example, are they going into pharma? Are they going to become a deliverer of medicine? they're buying some things, they're playing with it. How big are they going to go into grocery? I mean, they are in a lot of categories that each have complexity and leadership. And so I think he looks at his schedule and realizes that the do something new and big and interesting part of his schedule is relatively small given to the fire chief deal with issues thing. And you're right. I think the breakup and the issues of the federal government and lobbying are not fun. Like, I don't think he wants to be in the weeds on that. So, but I don't think he's pulling back because he wants a little bit of me time. I don't buy that at all. I think it's the exact opposite. I think he wants to go
Not
bigger.
even so much like me time. Like Amazon is so much what he wants, but I guess it's. I just think it's less. Maybe it's accountability that I'm trying to say. It's like he wants more leeway to do the things that he cares most about.
All right. So let me tell you how I've switched positions on this since we agreed to do this pod. Where I'd gotten to in my head when I had my conversation with Jeff that he didn't participate in was the world has really, the information space is really broken. He knows he can do good there. It's a huge, complicated problem. What he's done at the Washington Post has been impressive. People that work there say he's been a good owner and boss. Like, so with this checkbook that he has with $200 billion, you could literally make the decision that you're going to spend either on acquisitions or philanthropy, 3/4 of your money, and you'd still be left with, $50 billion.
Yeah.
Which is plenty to live on.
He currently sells $1 billion worth of Amazon stock each year in order to fund Blue Origin, his space endeavor. So I could totally see, especially now that Elon Musk has a net worth that's greater than his, doubling down on space and then actually creating a market. Because right now, SpaceX is really the only entity that I think can sort of compete, right? So SpaceX and Blue Origin, if they sort of start to compete with one another, it's going to actually accelerate the viability of commercial space travel, which is wild. I can't even believe I'm saying those words, but that is the name of the game.
So my first fantasy when I had him just doing Steve's bidding, when I said, all right, if Jeff called me up and said, Steve, here's $10 billion, you tell me where to spend it and I'll spend it. I would say buy Fox News, buy Reddit, buy Twitter. Don't change any of them fundamentally, but just bring them back to accountability in its center. So Fox News could remain a conservative news network. But it wouldn't be this crazy right-wing flying off the edge of the planet garbage. It would just be Republican centrist, which the world needs a Republican centrist media outlet or two or three, just not this crazy Hannity, Tucker Carlson crap. And he could buy that tomorrow. He could say to his lawyers, go get it for me, and they could go get it. And he could put a reasonable conservative in charge. And much like the Washington Post with Marty Baron, I mean, he could have a voice in it, but he wouldn't have to shut it down. He could just fix it. And the same thing with Twitter and the same thing with Reddit. I mean, these are all, they could go from being profit-driven business models to essentially, philanthropic, much like, the purchase of Time magazine by Salesforce, Benioff.
Yep.
So
my number one
love
for
that.
him would be, if he asked me what should I do with my money, I would probably say put it in the infrastructure around the delivery of the internet, meaning make like universal high-speed broadband a thing in the United States. Like, one of the reasons why Fox News is so problematic is because rural Americans can actually watch their television sets versus consume other types of content. So I
So,
think
so,
that
so, okay, all right. So let's split the difference. What if he buys Spectrum and Charter and Altice, and what if he buys all of the cable providers, the broadband cable providers? And
yeah,
like I
and then
love
actually
like
lays the infrastructure. Like it's ridiculous that running fiber is something that that's that's not the equivalent of like a telephone pole or an electric pole. Like we
so
need to
a
start thinking
couple
about Wi-Fi as like a utility.
a couple of weeks back, a month and a half ago, I wrote an open letter um, to Jack Dorsey and told him it was time to throw Trump off. And a week later, he followed my instruction and did that. So I'm feeling a little powerful. So maybe I'll write Jeff a public letter about how he should spend his money. Maybe that'll
All
be my
right, speed
weekend
round.
blog
Okay,
post.
so fixing sort of information on the web, part one. What is number 2 and 3 for you?
Um, I'd like to see thoughtful legislation about the role between government and platforms. I'm worried that the
Hmm.
Section 230 battle is going to be uh, a, a mess, and he could literally pour money into lobbyists in Washington and get that and have a rational plan for that. Uh, we're going to get to this who's going to be mayor of New York question a little bit later. It would be a rounding error problem for him to begin to rethink. I mean, the one thing we know is that when all those little orange robots are done being put in every Amazon distribution center in America, there's going to be a whole lot less jobs for people to pull boxes off of shelves and put them on conveyor belts. And there's a long-term question about whether it's universal basic income or kind of rethinking work in America as AI and robots start to do, what used to be kind of low-level blue-collar jobs. I think he could do interesting work there. But everything I read, so two things that changed my opinion a little bit about the Jeff money. One is I talked to someone who knows him very well, and I gave them my pitch for why he should fix the internet. And they said, having spent a lot of time with him, don't be confused and think that he's driven by any sense of public good. Like that's just not, like he understands it's important and he's going to do philanthropy, but he's done very little. And that's like, it's just not how his DNA is built. So space seems more like the thing he has wanted to do since high school.
Yeah, so it's not even about his motivations being tied to Earth. It's like beyond that. It's like intangibles.
Do you think he and Musk get along?
Mm, like, do I think they text each other and like talk and share
Yeah.
feelings? No. Do I think that they have like an understanding of one another that uh, and respect? Like, absolutely. I mean, there are only so many billionaire, borderline trillionaires in the world, and I think individuals who have sort of the audacity and vision that they have. So, I mean, that alone, it's like again, whether they enjoy each other's company, I don't know, but do they probably have some type of like, I see you, I get you kind of thing? Sure.
But I don't think he's racing to the moon for any kind of like benchmark to beat Elon. I think he's been at it since high school. He's a massive Star Trek fan.
He's just like late to the game, but it could also be strategic. It could be like, oh, let Elon go sort of get V1, V2 or hit certain milestones. And then once he takes these unknowns then and makes them knowns, then I can just like accelerate from there as a jump off point, which is a really smart way to kind of build a business.
All right. So I've got a blog post to write in which I do a shopping list for Jeff just in case he hasn't done it himself, which will be fun. I'm looking forward to that. So shall we move off to chapter 2 and talk about this next week and the impeachment that's going to eat every waking moment of the next week?
Sure, let's do it. So I will disclose before we go into this that I actually am over Donald Trump and hearing anything about it. I understand this impeachment trial is important, but I'm sort of like, and I want accountability, but it's like I just want Trump and everything that he is to just keep getting smaller and smaller and feel like a distant echo. And so I'm hoping that next week is sort of the last of it.
So I agreed with that. And I think that history, once we get through this, and it's still, a month ago, but like it is staggering how much my media has changed from the moment that Jack Dorsey shut him off. Like,
oh yeah, I mean, I'm like back on Twitter because I can actually stomach it again.
But it does raise interesting questions about now looking in the rearview mirror, how much Twitter was a unique amplifier of fascist speech.
Yep.
All right. So here's why the impeachment is important and exciting.
Okay.
And I use those words advisedly. We are 2 years away from an election. And everyone who's up for re-election in the Senate is concerned about, and the House to some extent as well, is concerned about how they're positioned as being in some way, shape, or form, anti-Trump. And what makes that interesting is, the Trump base, whatever that word now means, it isn't 50% of the Republican Party. But the Republican Party, the country is divided enough that whatever that 10% is that's actually going to vote for Trump's endorsement, almost no matter who it is, if you lose that, if you lose that base, you lose the election. So everyone's tiptoeing around how they can be, the radical right and the middle right at the same time. And here's why I think Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday are so important. Because we know there are 10 Republicans who voted to impeach Trump.
Led by Liz Cheney, who almost got ousted.
Well, although not almost. Not when the actual thing came to a vote.
Yeah.
So we need 17 votes in the Senate to have the impeachment be a conviction. So that we're really down to 7 votes that are up for grabs. And we really don't, there's a lot of things we don't know. We don't know if McConnell's ability to whip votes is endangered or whether or not he has the ability to whip votes. Yep. He's made it clear that he thinks that Donald Trump committed a crime or impeachable offenses. That's not a little thing.
Right.
So the Democrats are going to come in on Tuesday and they're going to make this very careful, very logical, very one foot in front of the other argument. And it's going to be covered aggressively and publicly by all the mainstream media. And it's going to be mostly ignored by Fox News, Newsmax, OAN, and then all of the, Washington blogs and various, So if your entire news consumption is inside that frame, you're almost not going to know that there's an impeachment hearing going on.
Yeah. So
But if you're one of, but if there are 7 votes that are not up for re-election in the next 2 years, that's what I've been trying to calculate is, are there 7 Republicans who just got reelected? And so even though they're right of center and they're whatever, they're like, you know what? This is not in mine, because they're all looking out 2 years. That's the whole thing.
Yeah. So I have a list of 12 Republican senators who are open to voting, open to conviction. So you tell me. I'm gonna just say the 12 names, and if you think you can find 7 out of this list, then let's see. So there's Todd Young, Indianapolis or Indiana, Bill Cassidy, Louisiana, Susan Collins, Maine, Mike Crapo, Idaho, Mitch McConnell, Kentucky, Lisa Murkowski, Arkansas, Rob Portman, Ohio, James Risch, Idaho, Mitt Romney, Utah, Ben Sasse, Nebraska, Dan Sullivan, Arkansas, and then Pat Toomey, Pennsylvania, and then Independent Angus King, Maine.
So I don't know all of them. I know Angus King. I obviously know McConnell. I know a bunch of them. But I think we need 17 total.
17 total. Okay. So
that's a chunk of them. But here's I guess the other thing that's going to happen. So, everyone's trying to calibrate the public mood. So if the Democrats do their job and they make the case and they show the media and they show it, the videos, and they put people on the witness stand and they just make it a crushingly overwhelming story, and the phones start ringing in Republican Senate's office that are dramatically pro-conviction, you'll start to see some number of people go, well, I'm hearing from my base, I'm hearing from my electorate, and they're really angry and they're really scared and they want this Civil War crap put back in a box. Like, I don't think it's been. Now, the other thing is, if you look at the data, when Trump goes out onto the playing field and tries to lobby to get people elected, when he supports candidates, this was when he was president of the United States, not the ousted, not ex-president of the United States, he mostly fails.
Yeah.
So if you're an on the fence, about to be up for re-election Republican, you don't really want him coming to your district and rallying for you, because that has a history of failing. You might want money from him, but historically he doesn't give you any. And that was when he had it, before he was going bankrupt. So you're not going to get money from him. And you don't want his endorsement. What you want is for him to not rally a primary challenge against you.
Mm-hmm.
That may be an unwinnable battle. I mean, you don't want him angry. The other thing is, every day that goes on, he's more of a toothless tiger. He doesn't seem to be building any political operation.
If they impeach him, they remove or eliminate the possibility of him running again, right? That's why this is so critical.
Important. Yeah. And let's not forget that Tish James and New York State and a whole bunch of other people have lawsuits that are coming down the pike that are going to make him have to pay. Here's the other thing. I'm enjoying this, so sorry if I'm going down the deep end, but he had these lawyers, a legal team 2 weeks ago that most people said was pretty competent, pretty good. And then if you read the trades, the press, he got into a battle with them over money, and he wouldn't pay their fees. So they quit, and now he's got this weird ragtag Plan B group that's not very solid.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, but if you were going to be defending yourself against impeachment, I wouldn't go for the discount lawyers.
Yeah, but he also might not have money.
Well, no, and I don't know how much of the money he raised from the last election he can just move around, because that whole PAC money. So net, I think it's really important I think McConnell, I would not underestimate McConnell.
Yeah. Okay, so your prediction, if you had to just, if you were in Vegas and you were putting, I don't know, $10,000, does he get impeached? I mean, do they vote for conviction?
I think McConnell wants to win back the Senate in 2 years. And I think that McConnell doesn't want, like he tolerated Trump and made him do a lot of things he wanted to get done. But I believe McConnell wants Trump off the playing field. So I'll give you a bonus answer.
Okay.
If the Democrats could have any one witness that they could put on the stand that would tell the story of Trump and what he was doing the day of that, whatever the hell it was called, the thing on the mall, the
insurrection.
Yeah.
Oh, his speech.
I can tell you the witness I want.
Who?
I want Pence.
Oh, yeah.
So if Pence goes on the witness stand, two things happen. One, theoretically, he is able to say, I had to call in the National Guard because Trump wouldn't pull the trigger and we needed troops. Trump sat and watched TV and giggled. And it potentially makes Pence a presidential candidate in 4 years.
Yep. I mean, I thought Pence showing up to the inauguration was sort of a way to say that he wants to take a run at it in the future.
He's his own man.
Right. Yeah.
So you heard it here first. We want. All right. So which brings us to the end of chapter 2. Make your popcorn. I know you're not going to watch. That's okay. Okay. It's all right. It'll make its way into your feed gently. And we'll know by the way, did you just see that Trump's lawyers asked for Friday off because he's Jewish and he needs the Sabbath?
Yeah.
I wonder if judges accept that as you've got 2 lawyers, just send the non-Jew on Friday.
I don't know. It's a world.
I'm sorry. Am I making you exhausted? I don't mean to be making you exhausted.
Let's just talk about the mayors in New York City. That's more exciting for me.
All right. We're moving to the mayors. Last but not least. So let's get to the important mayor thing first. The election for the mayor of New York is theoretically this coming November, but in real life, it is this coming June. Because that's when the primary is.
June 22nd, right.
June 22nd.
So there are 22 candidates running for June 22nd, and they're all starting out in sort of a mostly virtual campaign setting, which is just weird and unprecedented.
So the question is, how do you want to stack them? Based on viability, based on polling data, based on money?
I'm honestly just catching up because this reminds me of the presidential election when the Democratic field was so crowded. And I think, given the context that we're in right now, the pandemic coming out of it, I think, you can almost start at a high level, which is like, do you want, institutional, like experienced person, or do you want an outsider? Like, who does New York need? And then I also think there's another layer, which is like people who are affiliated with de Blasio. And, does that immediately rule people out, just given how just not like we're not satisfied with his his performance as a mayor? What do you think?
So you have to keep in mind that Yang just got in the race, 2.5, 3 weeks ago. So he hasn't shown up in any of the fundraising data yet because there hasn't been a filing. I think you'll see his first fundraising announcement in the next of how many dollars he's brought in the last week or two. And he's polling very, very high because he has huge name recognition.
Right.
I mean, among the kind of lifelong Democrat friends I have, there are people that support Sean Donovan. There are people that support Raymond McGuire. Those are the two names that come up a lot in my world. But Ray McGuire is polling at 2%, and Yang, I think, according to New York Magazine, is polling at 32%.
Wow.
So Yang is ahead of everybody in the polling.
So I'm forgetting which link it was, or if I just read it separately. But historically, the voter turnout for the mayor race is incredibly low. Something
Tiny.
like
22%, 23%.
Yeah.
It's tiny.
23% of all New Yorkers participate. And this is one of those races that has major consequences, and I think is maybe more critical than ever. So,
and
take one thing away from this podcast: if you live in New York City, get educated and vote.
And now, if I'm going to geek out on election stuff for a second, this is the first time in New York that we will be implementing ranked choice voting.
Yes, finally.
So without spending too many cycles on it, it's essentially, as each candidate at the bottom of the list doesn't meet a certain threshold, their votes roll up to the next candidate so that it becomes a pyramid, so that over time it comes down to the candidates that are the most popular collectively. There's a lot of projections on ranked choice voting. It's a little bit of a coin toss at this point because no one quite knows how it's going to work. But I have become, in the last 2.5 years, over time, a passionate advocate for Andrew Yang.
So I want to know, one, that's cool. Two, his platform when he was running for president was universal basic income. And so if he has this plan to sort of give 500,000 low-income New Yorkers $2,000 a year, I guess talk me through the logic of that. Like, where does that money come from, and how's $2,000 supposed to help people get out of this massive hole that we're in with the pandemic? Like, it doesn't eradicate maybe a year plus of unemployment. It doesn't eradicate sort of the creation of jobs or lack of jobs. Like, what is most appealing about his platform for you?
So I was in a room with him. This is now more than 2 years ago. You
interviewed him like a few months ago here.
I'm going way back. This is way back. I was invited to a fundraiser, small dollar fundraiser. He had his books on the table, and here's what he said that I'll never forget. He said, all these people that Trump is activating are scared. They're scared of the future. They're scared of their jobs going away. They're scared of not being relevant. They're scared. And he said, they're right to be scared, but they're not right. But we're pointing their fear in the wrong direction. So if you're a truck driver or a cab driver or a livery driver, anybody that has to do with a vehicle, you should be afraid of driverless cars because they are going to take or driverless trucks because they are going to take your jobs. If you're a checkout worker, like he made this whole list of jobs that technology is absolutely predictably going to take. And so the question that he said, and if you look at the numbers, he says, I'm a math guy. He says this a lot. If you look at the numbers, you can say, hey, we're going to replace all of these driving jobs with XYZ jobs. But in real life, the number of human jobs are going to change. And so what he's talking about with universal basic income on the federal level is a different way to value. Like he's kicked around, I don't know if it's still in the platform, but he kicked around when he was talking about the presidency about a robot tax, which was essentially charging every company that replaces a human job with an AI or a robot, every phone line that you call that now takes you through a phone tree and doesn't give you to a human, pays a fee into a jobs program, because those people are going to have to do different things in society, and we're going to have to change how we value different kinds of work. So right now we don't value poets or artists or dancers or musicians or or any of these things that bring us joy and purpose and society. We consider those all hobbies, or they're arts jobs, but they're very hard to fund. And so what he's essentially saying is, imagine a world in which robots, and I say that broadly, meaning any kind of a computer driven anything, do more kind of automatable jobs, and humans do more human jobs.
Yep.
And what I love about him is he's an entrepreneur and a startup guy in his DNA. And so I think he's really willing to see New York. New York has huge economic problems on the horizon. We all know that. It all comes from real estate taxes and property taxes and what's going to happen after we all work from home and these buildings don't have office workers that buy coffee on the street in the morning. He's willing to think about dramatically different ways to solve that problem. And so I don't think, basic income is a button you push that just magically. I agree with you. I don't think $2,000 solves anything. Well, it solves the question of whether or not. I mean, one of the things we know from some trials of UBI that is when you give people $13,000 a year so that they can feed their family at a very basic level, they don't go off and waste it. They use it for livelihood. Like giving people a sustainable base makes them more human, not less. So anyway, I mean, suffice it to say, he's worth paying attention to. He's a serious candidate. He's got a very strong running start. And if you compare him to either Ray McGuire or Sean Donovan, I mean, they are both very capable, well-known kind of managers. But I wouldn't call either of them innovators.
Yep. I think that makes sense. I have more homework to do in terms of reading up on this. I'm just curious how, like just the nitty gritty of, yes, in theory, a lot of these ideas and innovations like make sense, but do we have time, right? Like what's someone going to do day one, 30, 60, 90 days into the job that New Yorkers are going to feel the effects of, as fast as possible.
So two things. Yang has come out and said that he wants to take over the operational, not he personally, but he wants his administration to take over the operational responsibility for the MTA. There's always been this fucked up relationship between the state and the city, and you've seen it between Cuomo and de Blasio. Like the city puts all this tax money in state coffers, but the state has control over the airports and bridges through the MTA. So all that toll money the state gets to then dole out to the city. It's a broken dynamic, and I've been wholly unimpressed by the battles between de Blasio and Cuomo. I think they should have kept that out of the paper. So I think Yang's ability to build a right-shaped relationship between the city and state is going to be very important. So I'm excited about that. Anyway, look, I think, what's the famous, we're running out of time, but what's the famous political phrase? Never lose the opportunity of a big crisis.
Mm-hmm.
New York has a big crisis.
Never let a crisis go to waste.
Yeah. So we're not going to let this crisis go to waste. And the question is, when you pick a candidate, who's the candidate most likely to turn this crisis into opportunity? Fingers crossed.
Well, I'm sure we'll cover more in the months to come. So
indeed we will. And no politics next week, we promise. All right. See you next week. Bye,
see you next week.